In the endless stretch of the Wild West, where the sun burned the land golden and the air carried the scent of dust and wild sage, a woman named Clara rode across the open plains with her old horse, Rusty. She was known to be fearless, a sharp-eyed naturalist who had spent years studying the mysteries of life that roamed the desert. Every creature fascinated her, from the smallest desert fox to the mighty beasts that ruled the canyons. But nothing prepared her for what she would witness one fateful evening, something that would challenge everything she knew about nature and humankind. Clara had set up camp near the Red Canyon, a place whispered about by local ranchers and hunters. They said strange things happened there, the kind of tales told around firelight to scare travelers. But Clara was a woman of reason. She didn't believe in ghost stories. She believed in facts, in studying what others feared. The canyon, with its high red cliffs and shadowed corners, seemed the perfect spot to document the behaviors of wolves, the area's apex predators. She had seen them from afar before, powerful, graceful, and cunning. They were the rulers of this land. As twilight painted the canyon in orange and pink, Clara unpacked her equipment. She had her journal, her spyglass, and her sketchbook ready. She planned to spend the night watching the wolves hunt from a safe distance. The wind was calm and the land seemed at peace, until she heard something that made her heart skip a beat. It was a strange crackling sound, not quite the rustle of leaves or the movement of an animal. It sounded like fire. Clara crouched behind a boulder, her eyes scanning the far end of the canyon. Through the wavering heat of the desert air, she saw smoke rising. Someone else was there. Curious and cautious, she moved closer, keeping low and silent. The smell of roasting meat drifted through the air. For a moment, she smiled, perhaps another traveler cooking supper. But when she looked through her spyglass, what she saw turned her smile into disbelief. A man sat by the fire, his face lit by its orange glow. He looked rugged, sunburnt skin, torn clothes, and eyes that carried a mix of hunger and madness. On a spit above the flames was something large and muscular, the kind of creature one would expect to see leading a pack, not turning over a campfire. It took Clara a moment to understand what she was seeing. The man was roasting a wolf. Her heart raced. Wolves were not only wild predators, they were symbols of the wilderness itself. They hunted, yes, but they also kept the land in balance. To see one killed and eaten by a man, it felt like nature itself was being defied. She watched as the man tore a piece of meat with his hands, eating it like someone who had been starving for days. Clara wanted to look away, but her curiosity kept her rooted. Who was this man? Why would he kill such a creature? As night fell deeper, the man's campfire flickered against the canyon walls. Clara could hear the distant howls of wolves echoing through the night, the rest of the pack searching, mourning, perhaps sensing the loss of one of their own. The sound sent chills down her spine. Rusty, her horse, grew restless and pawed the ground nervously. The air felt heavier now, filled with the tension of the unseen wild. Clara decided to stay hidden until morning. She wrote quickly in her journal, documenting what she saw. Man found roasting the apex predator of this land. Behavior unnatural. Wolves nearby agitated. Must observe further. But she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that she was witnessing something more than just hunger. It felt like a warning, a sign that man had begun to take too much from nature. As dawn broke, the sky turned pale gold and the man still sat by the dying fire, his face covered in ash and soot. Clara could see the remnants of the feast, bones scattered carelessly around. The wolves had gone silent, but their presence could be felt in the shadows beyond the ridge. The man looked around nervously, as if realizing he was being watched, though he couldn't see Clara. He muttered something under his breath, words carried faintly by the wind. She couldn't make them out, but they sounded like regret or fear. Then, without warning, a deep growl rolled through the air. Clara's pulse quickened. From the far side of the canyon, 3 wolves appeared, their eyes glowing in the morning light. They moved slowly, cautiously, circling the man's camp. He froze, gripping his knife. Clara wanted to shout, to warn him to run, but her voice caught in her throat. It was as if she were watching nature reclaim what was stolen. The man stood tall, trembling but defiant. "You'll not take me," he shouted hoarsely into the silence. But the wolves didn't attack. They simply stared at him, cold, unblinking. Then one of them raised its head and howled, long and sorrowful. The man's expression shifted from anger to something like guilt. Clara could see the realization dawn in his eyes. He understood what he had done. Moments later, the man dropped his knife, turned, and ran toward the open desert. The wolves didn't chase him. They stayed near the fire, sniffing the remains of their fallen kin. Clara's chest ached as she watched the scene. Nature, even in grief, showed more restraint than humankind. When the sun rose high enough to warm the canyon, Clara finally stepped out from her hiding place. She approached the camp slowly, her boots crunching softly on the dry soil. The fire had burned down to ashes. The bones of the wolf lay scattered like pieces of a broken story. She knelt and whispered softly, "I'm sorry." That morning, she packed her things and rode away, her mind heavy with questions. Who was that man? What had driven him to such an act? And what would become of this fragile balance between man and nature? As the wind swept through the canyon, Clara looked back one last time. She saw the wolves still standing on the ridge, watching her silently. For a moment, she felt as though they understood her, that they knew she was not like the man who had defied them. There was respect in their gaze and something else, a quiet warning that the wild would never bow to human hunger. Clara rode on, the echo of the wolves' final howl following her across the open land. It was not a sound of anger but of endurance, a reminder that no matter how much mankind tried to dominate nature, the spirit of the wild would always endure. And though she would go on to write about her discovery, about the man who dared to feast on an apex predator, she would never forget the look in those wolves' eyes, ancient, untamed, and forever watching. Days passed after Clara left the Red Canyon, but the strange sight she had witnessed haunted her thoughts. She could not forget the image of that man roasting a wolf over his campfire, nor the silent eyes of the wolves who watched from the cliffs. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the flames flickering against the canyon walls and heard the lonely howls echoing through the night. The Wild West was full of mysteries, but this one felt different. It felt like nature itself was trying to send her a message. Clara decided to visit the nearest settlement, a small dusty town called Silver Creek, 2 days' ride from the canyon. The town was quiet, built around a single main road lined with a saloon, a blacksmith, a few wooden houses, and a sheriff's office. As she tied Rusty outside the saloon, people gave her curious looks. She was known in these parts, the lady who roamed the wild alone studying animals instead of raising cattle or running a store. But today her face showed something none of them had seen before: unease. Inside, she ordered a cup of coffee and sat by the window, lost in thought. A group of men nearby were talking about a stranger who had passed through town a week ago. Clara listened carefully. One of them said he looked half dead, said he hadn't eaten in days, claimed something chased him out of Red Canyon. The words made her heart race. It had to be the same man she saw. Did he say what chased him? Clara asked softly. The men turned toward her. Wolves, one said. He swore they were after him, said they watched him even when he slept. Sheriff thought he was losing his mind. Poor fellow left town 2 days ago, heading west. Clara stared out the window, her fingers tightening around her cup. The man was still alive, but barely holding on to sanity. She wondered if the wolves were truly following him, or if his guilt had turned into something that lived inside his mind. She knew one thing, and the story was not over. The next morning, Clara packed her gear and rode west, following faint tracks along the dry riverbed. The sky was pale blue, and the wind carried the scent of rain far away. For miles, there was nothing but dry grass, scattered rocks, and the occasional hawk gliding above. But as she rode deeper into the open land, she began to notice signs. Footprints, ashes of small campfires, and scraps of cloth torn from a coat. He was still out there. By sunset, she reached a small ravine. Rusty snorted and stopped suddenly. Clara dismounted and crouched low. In the soft red glow of dusk, she saw him, the same man sitting by a cold fire staring into nothing. He looked weaker now, his face pale, lips cracked, and eyes full of fear. She approached slowly, not wanting to startle him. "Sir," she called gently. "Are you all right?" The man turned sharply, his knife trembling in his hand. But when he saw her, he lowered it. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. "They're watching." "Who's watching?" she asked. "The wolves," he said. "They don't forget. They follow me. Every night I hear them closer." Clara glanced around, and there was no sound except the soft whistling of wind. "You killed one," she said calmly. "You took what wasn't yours. Nature always remembers." He looked down at his hands as if he could still see the blood there. "I didn't want to," he said weakly. "I was starving. My horse broke a leg and died. I had no food for days. The wolf came near my camp. I thought if I didn't kill it, it would kill me." Clara felt a wave of sympathy but also sadness. "Survival can make a person desperate," she said. "But some lines should never be crossed. The wolves are more than hunters. They protect this land in their own way." The man looked up, his eyes wet. "Then they'll have their revenge," he said. "I can feel it." That night they shared a small fire. Clara gave him some of her food and water. The stars stretched endlessly above them, and the night was so silent it almost felt sacred. Yet somewhere in the distance a single howl rose, then another. Soon the air was filled with the mournful chorus of wolves calling to each other. The man froze. "You hear that?" he whispered. Clara nodded slowly. "They're not coming to hurt you," she said softly. "They're reminding you of what you've done. Sometimes nature teaches us lessons in ways we can't forget." But as the night went on, the howling drew closer. The horses grew restless, and Clara could feel a tension in the air that made her heart beat faster. She stood and stared into the darkness beyond the firelight. Then she saw them, faint silhouettes moving along the ridge above the ravine. Their eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight, silent and watchful. The man stood too, trembling. "You see them, don't you?" "Yes," she said quietly. "And they see us." For a long time, neither of them moved. The wolves didn't approach. They simply stood there like guardians of the wilderness, keeping watch over those who had broken its laws. Then one by one they turned and vanished into the night, their presence fading like mist. The man sank to the ground, breathing heavily. "Why didn't they attack?" he asked in disbelief. "Because they already have," Clara said gently. "You carry their mark in your heart, the guilt, the fear. That's punishment enough." He looked at her, eyes wide, understanding dawning on him. For the first time in many nights, tears filled his eyes. Not of fear, but of realization. "Then what should I do?" "Make peace," Clara said. "Leave this land as it is. Respect it. Let it heal." The next morning, when the first light touched the horizon, Clara woke to find the man gone. His footprints led west, toward the mountains. She didn't follow. She knew his path was no longer hers to trace. Some journeys needed to be taken alone. Weeks later, Clara returned to Red Canyon to continue her study. The air felt different now, calmer, quieter. The wolves had returned to their territory, and their distant howls once again sounded like songs instead of cries. As she sat near the cliff, sketching in her notebook, she thought about how thin the line was between survival and destruction, between man's hunger and nature's harmony. One evening, she found something near the same spot where she had first seen the man's camp. A small leather pouch tied to a rock. Inside was a piece of folded paper. It was a note written in rough handwriting. "To the lady who showed me mercy. I've left this land and made peace with myself. The wolves no longer follow me. Tell them I'm sorry." Clara smiled softly, her eyes misty. She tucked the note into her journal, next to her sketches of the wolves. That night, as the moon rose over the canyon, she sat beside her fire and listened. From somewhere far in the distance came the faintest howl, not of warning but of understanding. Clara closed her eyes and whispered, "Peace to you too." The wind swept through the canyon like a gentle sigh, carrying her words into the wild. And as the stars shimmered above the vast desert, Clara knew that nature had forgiven in its own quiet way. The balance was restored, and the story of the man who had feasted on the planet's apex predator became a lesson carried by the whispers of the Wild West. A story of respect, redemption, and the unbreakable bond between man and the wild that will always outlast time itself.